Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the DTN Ag Summit Series webinar event. I'm your host, DTN Farm Business Editor Katie Dellinger. I'm so excited to have you here for today for this event, which we themed Planning for Success. On this third day of December of 2025, we're looking forward. We're looking back a little bit at the past year, but we're also looking forward at the year ahead. It's not been an easy year if you are on the row crop side of agriculture. It's maybe a different story if you are on the cattle side of the business. And we're going to be talking about a lot of different issues between and across all subjects of agriculture here today. First, I'm going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping things. I'm going to go over the agenda. I'm going to address how to do questions, and then we'll get it kicked off with our first session for the day. Today, with our agenda, we're going to start off with a conversation with two of the winners of the America's Best Young Farmers and Ranchers Award. This is an award that our magazine, Progressive Farmer, puts together every year. It is in its 16th season, and we've had some really great success, and a lot of great stories have come out of the farmers, ranchers, and families that we spotlight throughout the series through the years. We're going to have two of them with us today, talking about a little bit of the differences of their operations. Young farmers right now are facing a different, or at least a more intense set of struggles starting up businesses in this challenging commodity price environment. We're going to follow their panel up with a session by ShayLe Stewart. She's DTN's livestock analyst. She's going to give us a look into those cattle markets, talk a bit about where we are standing as far as the herd, potential expansion, some of the challenges that are happening in that sector. That's our program for today. We're also going to convene tomorrow morning, same time, 9:30, where we're going to take a deep dive into the weather and grain markets. I encourage everyone to come back and join us for those sessions as well. We think those are going to be important pieces for you as you go ahead and start planning your 2026 growing season, knowing what the long range forecasts are looking for as far as will it be a La Nina? We'll see. We'll hear from John Baranek, our meteorologist, on that. And then we'll hear from Rhett Montgomery, our lead grain analyst, about what's happening in the grain markets, where that could be going, along with some of the trade developments that are happening and seem like they're always constantly changing. So back to today, before I send it over to our panel discussion with our technology editor, Dan Miller. If you have a question, please drop it in the Q&A section below. We will be doing moderated Q&As throughout our Zoom webinar. So if you drop them in there, Dan will see them for this next panel and may ask during his session, or when you have them for ShayLe, put them in there and ShayLe and I will do questions at the end. So I want to now bring in Dan Miller. He is one of our Progressive Farmers senior editors, and he's been doing the Best Young Farmers and Ranchers Award now for how long, Dan? How long have you been working
the entire time, all 16 years of
entire
it?
time. So you can really speak to the history of this program. Tell me
Right.
what does the Best Young Farmers and Ranchers program mean? What are you trying to accomplish by doing this every year?
We're trying to point out innovative, imaginative management practices, farming operations. We've kept it widely diverse all across the United States, from California out to the East Coast. This year we have operators from Nebraska out to Indiana, then down to Arkansas, and in operations, traditional corn and soybean operations. We've had a cotton operation in Arkansas this year. We've got a Christmas tree, pumpkin and Christmas tree operation. We've got a cattle operation, cow calf, and then Lily, who you'll meet in a minute. She also is starting a beef direct-to-consumer business. So that's kind of what we're going to talk today about. Are these extra? They're not really extra. That's an incorrect way of putting it, but these operations that are a little bit beyond the traditional corn and soybean operations. So.
Well, one thing that I heard at a recent ag bankers meeting, Dan, is that for farms to really be
Hmm.
financially successful, they need to have 3 to 6 sources of income, 3 to 6 revenue streams.
Yep.
I think that when you look at young producers or young operators today, that's traditionally a way, even if you have a family that's already farming, you have to have a way to justify adding a family to that business. So I know that that's something you've seen in a lot of your reporting over the years.
We have seen that a lot in reporting, and it's amazing. It's a lot of work. These operations, you've got your kind of your day-to-day operation, and then you've got extra additional operations going on, income streams. It's a lot of work. I'm always amazed by the amount of time, talent, and treasure these folks all put into their operations.
Well, I will hand it over to you, Dan, to introduce our guest this morning and tell us a little bit more about your project and what you work on when you're interviewing and meeting all of these wonderful farmers from across the country.
Sure. I wanted to introduce you first to Lucas Dull, and Lucas is general manager of Dull's Tree Farms in Thorntown, Indiana. They produce Christmas trees, pumpkins, and a whole lot of other, I think, 45 activities they run out there. They are an agritourism operation that draws upwards of 80,000 people a year from the Indianapolis area and beyond. And then the other person I wanted to talk to you about is, or introduce you to, is Lily Beringer. Lily and her husband Brian have a feedlot operation. They also have a cow-calf operation. And Lily has started a farm store. She's shipping out beef and other products to consumers, direct-to-consumer operations. So, Lily, if I can start with you, tell us about the operation you and Brian run.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Like Dan mentioned, I'm Lily with Behringer Family Farms. So we are a third generation farmer here in Cascade, Iowa. Like he had mentioned, we have primarily beef, so cow calf from birth till finish operation, and we also custom feed for a different farmer, and we finish out some of our own. And then in 2021, I started the direct consumer side where we get our home raised beef processed into individual cuts that has like a clear vacuum seal packaging with our farm logo on it. And then we sell that through our online website of shipping to all 50 states that we ship on Mondays. And then we also it'll be 2 years in March, opened up a farm store right here on our farm that we sell obviously our meat out of, but then also other local farmers and products like, pork, chicken, eggs, cheese, kind of a one-stop shop farmers market type store. So we have kind of a lot of different moving parts and different entities that make up our operation.
Lily, tell us about the direct-to-consumer business. Kind of what was the nugget of that idea and how is it progressing?
Yeah, so a little backstory back in late 2019, my grandma passed away and we had to settle my grandparents' estate. There was kind of some unfortunate events that turned to the point of fresh out of college, not really any assets to lie on. I had the opportunity to buy my grandparents' home place, and it obviously didn't cash flow, just like it's so hard for anything to do these days. And so my kind of pull to do that was I needed to add a different income stream into our operation that we could control 100% year round. And that's kind of where the direct to consumer beef side came. At that time, that was when the cattle market was super low and we were, in the red, losing a couple $100 a head. And when you're trying to take out a loan to buy a farm and that's how your cash flow is, the bank doesn't really like that. And so my thought and way that I started that was to hopefully be able to control our price year round. And at that time too, I was also working full time for Purina Animal Nutrition as a livestock production specialist. And so it kind of was a side gig that I hoped to start and get rolling that would have lead me to be able to be farming full time. And I guess I'm happy to say now that that's the case.
Okay. Okay. Lucas, tell us about Dulles Tree Farms. Tell us about that.
Sure. So we started on a more traditional route with a corn and soybean operation that my dad had come back and joined his dad in the early 80s, and we also had a smaller farrow to finish hog operation. Um, and so originally, when my dad went back to the farm, the plan was going to be to expand the hogs, but early 80s was a poor time for expanding hog operations. So my parents decided as a source of side income, maybe they would just plant some Christmas trees and make a little side business out of having a choose and cut Christmas tree farm. And no pun intended, but it continued to grow and grew to a point where it felt like it was more than a side business. And so when I had decided to come back to the farm, my focus was going to be on the agritourism side, which includes the Christmas trees, but also to take that business and make it into a sustainable standalone business. We added the fall agritourism season as well, growing pumpkins and a corn maze and having activities and all these things for families to come out to the farm to enjoy. And so since since starting that, we actually did get out of the row crop farming in 2019, and are full-time on what we consider agritourism, which includes our fall season and our choose and cut Christmas trees.
How has the business grown over the years since 2019? I mean, what are some of the things you've seen if you're looking at milestones along the way?
Yeah, we had a few years there where we were growing very rapidly, and part of that actually was uh, COVID, where a lot of the activities and things for families to participate in were shut down. But we were able to continue to operate because we're outside. We have plenty of space, and so we gained a lot of customers during that time, and we've been able to maintain them. Um, the the thing that has helped us grow is that kind of my generation and anybody younger than myself doesn't really have grandpa's farm to go back to during the summer sometime to enjoy as much as they did in generations older than myself. And so there's that kind of desire to be able to do that, to go visit a farm and be entertained. We try to get some education into them as well while they're here, and give people that experience that a lot of people's kids especially don't get these days.
Okay. One additional question before I go back to Lily. Tell us about the Christmas trees, because that's very unique. It's an 8-year rotation, right? If that's the right way to put it. Can you talk about growing Christmas trees and some of the challenges in doing that? And also it's your operation is a cut your own operation. You're not going out and cutting it and selling them like wholesale then.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So everything is sold right off our farm, retail. That's kind of what we're set up for, is for people to come to the farm and visit. Christmas trees definitely poses some different challenges to an annual crop, where you've got 8 years of weather for just that one crop that you're worried about. And there's a lag in any kind of change that you want to make with your actual production. If we decided that we need more trees, well, we could plant more trees next spring, but it really doesn't make a bit of difference to our supply for 8 years. And a lot can change again in 8 years. So trying to get a good feel for what are kind of the trends of people, and not just the fads, because Christmas trees business lags too much to keep up with fads. But what are the really cultural trends that we can, try to lean into and continue to create experience and provide a supply of Christmas trees that people want 8 years from now, because this spring the trees that we plant have to be for that market.
Okay. And tell our listeners and people watching this webcast, you manage what, about 60,000 trees, 65,000 trees? I mean, it's not a small endeavor.
Yes, yeah. So and that's one of the things that drew me to this kind of specialized farming, is that you can do a lot on a lower amount of acres. So, we really operate on about 100 acres total, and 65 of that is in Christmas trees. And that sounds like a lot of trees, but you also have to remember that we have ones that we just planted, that and everything between there and the year that we're selling. So our goal was to get to a point where we have 8 acres of trees available each selling season, which would be about 7,500 trees that we would have available for our customers to choose from. And currently we're selling about 6,000 a year. So we feel like we're in a pretty good spot with that number. But it is constant maintenance to grow those trees over those 8 years. It's not a plant them and forget them type of thing. There's a lot that goes into it all year long. People always think we'll only get to work from Thanksgiving to Christmas, and I wish that was the case, but it's not.
Yeah. Hey, Lily, I wanted to ask you tell us about your business in terms, I mean, the direct to consumer business. How has it grown? What kind of trends are you seeing there?
Yeah, it's really hard when you kind of first get started. Like I said, I had a lot of things juggling and going on, so it kind of was just my little side gig of bootstrapping initially. I found some chest freezers on Facebook Marketplace, and I first initially started out of like I could hold 3 head total in these 3 freezers that I had. Everything had to be sold before I could bring more in. And it kind of has just kind of slowly grown from there where, we're obviously out of chest freezers now. We have a large 18 by 20 walk-in freezer that I could hold like 20 head max on. And like I said, we have the addition of the farm store. So over the past, I don't know, I guess it's going to be coming on 5 years. It's kind of grown, way exceeded my expectations. We had, I had a goal of selling 10 head in my first year. And like I said, this is all just as individual cuts. We don't do any quarters, halves, nothing like that. And we ended up doing 18 in our first year, and now we're around like 60 to 70 head that I'll sell as all individual cuts today. And that's through either online that we do shipping or through our farm store. And I've had to kind of be creative of how we could move all of the product because like I said, when it's all individual cuts, you only get 20% of the animal on steaks and you end up with a bunch of burger. And so we also kind of have gotten some of our ground beef put into bigger packages that we source a couple of restaurants. We've gotten meat into some schools. We've kind of done some partnerships with some food pantries. And so it's definitely been a learning curve, but it's challenging and it's fun and it's really rewarding. And I just love working with the different customers and consumers and connecting with them.
If someone go to your website, they're going to find there you have different packages, I guess, of meat, right? That some steak, some hamburger, everything in between. Tell us about those. How do you put those packages together?
Yeah, so there's kind of a couple different options. Every week we try to run a weekly special. So that's just a mix of certain cuts that we just kind of feel. So a lot of times we try to tailor it with like a recipe of the week too. So it's like, oh, if you haven't had this cut before, try this recipe with it. So that's an option. Or you literally could just go and create an individual order. Like if you just want 2 ribeyes and you want 1 roast, you can do that. So you can order everything just on 1 cut basis. Or we have specific bundles that are available all the time. So like there's like a grill and chill bundle or a steak sampler bundle. Sometimes some people just don't really, they just need an idea of like what could we put together to make a box. And so those are always available. And then we also have like a farm club subscription thing where you can get a box shipped every 30, 60, 90 days. And so that's an option as well too. So there's, I guess, multiple ways that you could create it. And it's really interesting to see like the dynamics in customers and consumers on what people choose.
Okay, now you ship. Oh, let me ask you a question first about the recipes because I think that's kind of unique. People aren't only buying a cut of meat, but you're showing them how to prepare that meat. Where do you get the recipes from?
Well, it's kind of between me, my mom, and my sister that we kind of tailor stuff back with. We've had a lot going on lately with bringing in a new baby into the mix, and so it's kind of that's kind of gone off for a little bit, but generally every Thursday we try to do a recipe of the week, and like it's either just like our family staple that a recipe we always use with that certain cut, or for instance, there's certain cuts that we sell like a hanger steak or a picanha. That stuff isn't what you're not going to find that in the store because it's a very unique cut and there's only a couple per animal. And so some people might see that and be like, I've never heard of that for one. And like two, how would I even prepare that? So then sometimes some of those special ones, we show how to do that. And then every week when we posted the recipe, there's also a link to our website where all of them are posted. So, if we've done it before and then people want to come back to it, they can just go to the recipe tab on our website and, find all of those options.
Okay, one more question, then I want to go back to Lucas. What about shipping costs? You ship every Monday, right? And
Mhm.
is it UPS you use or
Yep, primarily UPS for everything.
shipping that kind of that process, the cost of it and everything, how you handle that?
Yeah, shipping is definitely not an easy thing to tackle, especially when as soon as it leaves our warehouse, it's out of our control. And post COVID, UPS actually doesn't guarantee any perishable shippings anymore. So that's also sometimes very frustrating. But how the shipping process looks like is we have a box with an insulated liner that correlates to that box. You put the meat in it, and then you add dry ice, shut it up, tape it, and then put a shipping label on it. goes on the UPS truck, and then it'll arrive at your doorstep within 1 to 2 days, depending on your location. So we're shipping from Iowa, and depending, if you're just around basically the surrounding states of Iowa, you can generally get there in like a 1 day ground. But once you go past that, you're gonna have to go onto like an air shipping, and so that in order to get it there in enough time. And so we have kind of basically on the back end of our website, each state is entered into like a shipping category. So depending on where your state is, it gives you your rate. And so it starts at $25, it goes to 35, and then goes to 45, depending on how far away you are from our state that we're shipping. And that's really just from the fact of the further away it gets, the more expensive the shipping label gets to get it that far in order to upgrade it to an air shipment. And yeah, it's a lot of logistics for sure.
All right, thank you. Hey, Lucas, tell me about Dulles Tree Farm in terms of seasons. You have a fall season, you have a Christmas tree season. Can you just kind of talk about how that's all been organized?
Yeah. So there's something that we could be doing every season, but we've chosen to narrow our focus and primarily focus on those two seasons, the fall and the Christmas tree season. And there's just so much energy that goes into those that we feel like if we expanded beyond that, then something would suffer. And so for us, our winter is our slow time. We get to do some planning and take a little bit of a breather. And then, there's a lot that is very still, it feels like traditional farming. Spring is busy because we're getting into tree planting. And there's a lot of tree maintenance things that start in the springtime with fertilizing and some of the early pest control. And then we'll get into pumpkin planting in the summer or early summer. And then leading into the fall season, we really shift our focus to preparing the farm for all of these thousands of people to come and visit. And so we're finishing up new activities that we're building and all of those types of things. And then, even with our pumpkins, we aren't picking those and wholesaling them or anything. It's all customers picking them. So our harvest seasons are primarily people focused because the people are coming to harvest the product themselves. And so we get a little bit of a break from public between fall and Christmas season, but it's a very busy time for us to transform the farm to give it that right feel for people coming for the tree season. And So yeah, that's kind of the cycle of our year, and it's again traditional in that 90% of our income comes in from September to December, and then we manage it for the rest of the 9 months.
Okay. So tell me about that flow of people because you really do get I was really surprised when you told me how many people come out to your operation in fall and winter. How do you manage that flow of people kind of through everything, through all the activities, the maize, the pumpkins, the trees, all that?
Yeah, it always presents a challenge, and it makes you think about a lot of things that you haven't thought about before, especially when you think about farming or agriculture. The how people interact with it is not really top of mind, but it has to be for us. So layout is important, making sure that the things that need to be most accessible are most accessible, like restrooms, for example. The first year that we put any kind of indoor plumbing restrooms that were public use, it was everybody's favorite addition was restrooms.
Yeah.
And so, trying to make sure that we are laying the farm out to where it works for people to come enjoy, where our food locations are. We have during our fall season, four, five different food locations on the farm, making sure that they're in the right places for people to interact with. And then after they get their food, do they have a place to sit and eat, or do they have to walk all the way across the farm before they find a picnic table and some shade or whatever? So there's a lot of those types of logistics that we have to think about, and I really enjoy that kind of thing. That's kind of forte, I guess, is trying to look into those things and figure out all of that flow. I have an engineering background as well, and that's kind of where that fits in a little bit.
Tell me about the food. You told me when I was out there that roughly 20-25% of your total income comes from food sales, correct? So how do you decide what you're going to serve and what do people ask for?
Sure. So we start with trying to think about the things that you would want to eat when you're on a farm. So we smoke all of our own pulled pork. We're smoking pulled pork probably 4 or 5 days a week during our busy season to keep up with the demand. We make our own apple cider donuts, which is a very popular fall treat, sweet treat that people enjoy. And then we try to think about what can be unique. So one of our more unique items would be stroopwafels, and that's a Dutch treat, and those are extremely popular now for us. But the other thing is, we kind of fall into that category where we can't operate like a restaurant, where we can take an order, prepare the food, bring the food out to a table, because our throughput would not work for that. So a restaurant generally is going to be open all year long, and we're seeing all of these people within a 6-week time frame and have to serve them in that short amount of time, which means our food has to be more of a quick service style of offering, while keeping a quality that is better than what you would expect out of quick service. And so that creates an interesting balance for us as well. And that's one of the things where networking with a lot of other agritourism farms across the country has been very valuable to us on the food side of things specifically, where we can share ideas and say, this worked, here's how you can make this product for 5,000 people in one day. And here's why this product can't be done that way. So don't try it, and all of those sorts of things.
Okay, one more question before I go back to Lily. We hear a lot of stories from farmers, corn and soybean farmers primarily. It's a hard ordeal to get employees. You have, I forget, it was 115 or 150 employees, but you have a lot of employees. You're managing a lot. Um, what are your secrets? What's the key to drawing an employee who's valuable to you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing at the same time is the seasonality of it. And so, our year-round staff is maybe in the 10 or 12 people range, but for those basically from September through December, we're up in the 150 to 170 staff members for those, 2.5 months. And um, so it's beneficial in that we can kind of convince people that it's short and you can come do it for a little while, even if you don't want, a part-time job all year long. And then it's also challenging because you lose some of the good ones that do want a part-time job all year long, and we don't have enough to keep all of those people on all year long. But we rely heavily on trying to create a work experience that people enjoy. We think if they enjoy being here, then that kind of bleeds over into the customer feeling that and knowing that the staff is enjoying themselves, and that helps with our retention as well. So like this year, we had 115 come back for the season, which is I think a pretty good retention rate for us. And then also making sure we're looking at diverse groups of people. So not all high school age staff, but we need some adult staff. Recently retired uh, staff has been an extremely important demographic for us, in that they don't want to work all the time after they retire, but they can work for 6 weeks and have Christmas money for all the grandkids or whatever. And a lot of those people we've been able to retain, which has been a huge benefit to our workforce.
Okay. Lily, I want to come back to you. You opened up a store, a physical store a couple years ago, you said, is that correct? And tell me about it. What's the purpose of the store and how's it been going there?
Yeah, so it would be March of 2023 when we opened it up. And the goal, one, was to try to bring more business to our local community. Because prior to the store, if anybody local placed an order, it was kind of a bunch of emails and communication back and forth of like, hey, thanks for your order. When do you want to pick it up? And sometimes, they'd say they'd be here at 9, and then all of a sudden they didn't show up till 9:30, or otherwise it'd be like, your box is on our back porch, just come and grab it, kind of a thing. And so it just wasn't the most convenient way for anybody local to pick it up. So that was kind of the first thought of, we need a physical storefront where it's nice and convenient, and there's like a legit location for people to come and get their beef. And of course, I didn't want to just settle on that's all that we want to offer, which is why we kind of built the whole storefront and brought in other things. And I think, especially post-COVID, the local food movement keeps booming as far as like consumers wanting to get connected to their food, wanting to know where their food comes from, and just even supporting local businesses and local farmers too. And so first I wanted to have the storefront up for that aspect, but we also kind of wanted a building block of, we're going to have the store, and then we're hoping to continue to grow more on getting people to the farm, kind of similar to what Lucas is doing, not to their extent, never would be able to handle that. But we have a couple events a year that we've started since having the store too. So every, I guess, late spring, early summer, we have a farm to table dinner here on the farm where we set up like long table, fancy lights, candles, and we cook like 100% from scratch meal to serve everybody that we sell tickets for. And then we've done it for 2 years so far. We have a Sunflower Fest event where we've planted an acre and a half of sunflowers, and we have people come out to the farm that day to just go through the patch. We set up a bunch of different activities, have a bunch of animals here. Really, like, when I first kind of started sharing online, and still even today, my goal is just to share the farm to table story and to connect consumers to their food, to connect them to a farmer, so they can learn where it's coming from. And so the more I can get people here on the farm and seeing what we're doing, the more, that's kind of our whole goal and our mission. And so we kind of started with those type of events, and we have plans to continue to kind of keep adding more of those things. My mom is really good at like canning and cooking and pie making and all of those type of things. So she's actually hoping to retire this spring from the school that she's been at for 25 plus years. And our goal with that is to be able to bring more events and things on the farm, to be able to just kind of connect people to their food and give them a face of where it's coming from.
Tell me about social media. It's an effort that's been very important to you, right, and to the success of your business, correct? What's if you were going to give 2 or 3 tips to somebody looking to do what you're doing social media wise, what would you tell them?
Yeah, the social media thing has kind of spiraled out of control, I guess in a good way. I never would have expected that it kind of has gone to where it has. But I started my pages back in 2019 from the fact of, I was just going to be graduating college, and it kind of takes you getting away from your little bubble at home to realize like not the rest of the world isn't doing what you're doing. And it took some of my college friends to be like, Lily, it's really unique that you as a female farmer are so involved in what you're doing on the farm. You're running all of the equipment, you're doing the whole business, all, feeding cattle, hauling manure, running in the fields. And they're like, there's not that many female figures that actually are doing all of that. And I just always kind of brush it aside, but it took, kind of a little push from them to be like, you should share about this. And like I had said, that's kind of how it started. And I was just moving home from college and just kind of I always just really have enjoyed like explaining what we're doing, because I'm super passionate about agriculture and kind of the farm to plate story. So I just started by doing that. And the main thing is just to stay consistent. And secondly, to stay like true and genuine to who you are and what your goal and mission is. I have a lot of people that, especially some people that have been there from the beginning, like in 2019 to now, where they're like, I just really appreciate that you share the good and the bad and just are so genuine about what you're doing. And I'm like, well, yeah, we don't have anything to hide. And I don't want people to think that, like, the farmers are the bad people here. Like, we're not. We're just the same people as you, but we just have a different, career choice, and we've gone a different route of what we're doing. And so really just consistency, being genuine, and just finding a way that you can connect to those people. Like, yeah, you guys might not understand the cattle industry and like why we're raising the animals we are here, but especially now that I've become a mom, I feel like I can connect with anybody on that aspect of like, well, you still have your, I can connect with you on your talking about your kids and that kind of thing. And then we can always, come back to the point of you have to feed them, and we can provide you a really good high quality protein source to do that. And you can have the face and you can have the trust with that by getting your beef through us.
Okay, thanks. Hey, Lucas, I wanted to touch back on employees real quick. You said you have, if I have it right, 10 to 12 year-round employees, correct? And what do you do to maintain that workforce for you?
So really it's been um, I call it kind of like an organic growth to that point of the staff that we have year round. Most of them would not be considered full time year round, but they are in situations where they're um, the ebb and flow of our business kind of lines up with them. So again, some of them are that kind of recently retired demographic that when we're busy, they're willing to come in and work, and when we're not so busy, they enjoy some more time off or take their vacations and things. And um, but really, I think one of the things that has helped differentiate us is that uh, what they do changes so much, and the people that have thrived in that enjoy that variability. So there's times when it's very much manual farmhand type of labor that they're participating in, and then there's these one-off building projects or special projects of trying to create this fun activity for families. And then we move into where we're bringing in other staff, and now they're going to be a little bit more people oriented and manage some of those staff and be customer facing. And I think that the for us it has been extremely important to find the right people and have the right people in the right seats, which can be challenging for that variability. But then when we find it, it's a little easier um, to maintain them and keep them with us because they enjoy it, and that's something that you don't get in several other uh, jobs. Even if it's a part-time job.
Okay. Can you give me a quick summary of your social media efforts, what you folks do?
Yeah, my wife is the one that really spearheads all of the social media stuff. But I would say that she would echo what Lily was saying about being genuine and real and not trying to be somebody you're not. And I think that people can kind of see that and feel that and connect more with you when it's like, okay, that's just you living life. And so she does a good job of including those types of things. It's like, all right, our life is crazy this time of year, and so this is what it looks like to try to get our kids to school or whatever the case is. And it's like, it's just again, one of those things where you do have to recognize that there's a lot of things about your life that don't feel special to you but feel special to other people because it's so different from the life they live. And so sharing that, but also not embellishing it. It's just, it is what it is, and here it is. Type of an approach, I think, has been what's been good for us. And then staying active, not going too long of like, okay, it can be kind of getting tired of participating in social media. But for it to be effective, you do have to stay active enough that there's always something out there for people to see.
Okay. Before I run out and start an agritourism business tomorrow, what do I need to know? What would you tell somebody that's looking to do this or kind of just getting their feet wet in it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most crucial beginning elements is location is extremely important. you may not, in other agriculture that's maybe commodity agriculture, the location isn't necessarily as crucial because you're not expecting people to come to your farm, and there's really a lot of ways to move your product. But for us, with people being, really a product of our business, we have to be close enough that they can get to us. We have to have space that is fit to have the infrastructure needed. You have to have a parking lot. Do you have space on the farm for cars to park? And at first it might be 10 or 20 cars or something, but now we need to be able to fit 1,200 cars. Well, where are we gonna do that? And then there's also a regulatory side that you need to be aware of. Agritourism is a new enough space that it's still in a gray area in a lot of places, and some uh, local governments fall heavy-handed on it, while others are very lenient on it, and so that's something to take into account. And then the next thing would be how are you gonna handle the people in terms of, are you gonna put in restrooms? Are you gonna put in all these walkways and that type of infrastructure that's needed as well, is always on our minds, and how we can better serve people.
Okay, last question for you, Lucas. I was curious. So, what's the biggest hurdle maybe you've hit, and how did you overcome it?
So well, weather is still always a hurdle, just like with any farming. And when we're supposed to be open and weather ruins one of our, busy days, that can be a big blow to our business. One of the things we've done to try to overcome that is having at least two seasons. The fall and the tree season gives us just enough diversification that if one experiences poor weather, hopefully the other one does not. Um, and then also trying to create spaces, indoor spaces and things that make us a little bit more weatherproof, maybe, in terms of people coming to enjoy the farm. I would say the regulatory has been a hurdle in terms of, there's a lot of ideas and things that we want to do, but we can't really get a clear answer on whether we can or can't, or if we do, this is how you have to do it. A lot of our buildings have to be commercial buildings for inviting public into them. That creates a challenge and an expense that we don't account for. Putting up a barn for agriculture purpose has a completely different price tag than putting up a barn that you're putting public inside of. And so those things have been hurdles for us. Um, so I would say probably that, yeah, that's probably the biggest. And how we've overcome the regulatory side of it is trying to be active in the development of, it's like I said, it's a new enough space. So there's still people that are looking at it and going, what should we be doing? And trying to be participants in that conversation and discussion, whether that's through, different boards or things like that. It has been a crucial part of us being able to move forward.
Okay, Lily, I wanted to ask you the same question. Give us a hurdle that you've had to overcome, and how did you do it?
Yeah, like I said, when we first initially got started, since it's all individual cuts that we're selling, probably the biggest thing was how can I move all of the product? And like I said, creating those different bundles of, putting a few popular items in it and then putting a few of the cuts that maybe aren't moving as fast to make a big bundle has kind of been really successful. And like I said, the largest thing was being able to move ground beef. So getting into certain restaurants and being able to move a bulk of it at a time, a couple hundred, 300-400 pounds at a time, as compared to just somebody picking up 5-10 pounds, has been a big deal. And just really kind of figuring out the cut list and what consumers want. So like another example, the beef short ribs, for instance, the first time I got them done, I had a bunch of short ribs, and people aren't familiar with short ribs. I'm not really even familiar with it, so I was sitting on a bunch of them. And then my butcher recommended, well, we can take the short ribs and we can make it into beef bacon instead of having it actually be a short rib. And I was like, what's beef bacon? And we got that done, and now that's been like a huge thing. And so just another thing too, like we used to always get all of the roast, and like the rump roast and sirloin roast never moved, but everybody always wants chuck roast. And so the biggest thing initially was just the logistics of like, what should our cut list look like? What are, customers going to want? What are they not going to want? How are we going to consistently move things so we're not sold out of steak, but we still have a bunch of ground and we can keep everything basically in a like fresh rotation. And then another logistics, once we kind of continued to keep growing, was lack of freezer space, because like I had said, all of our animals that we sell are home raised animals. And so initially we were primarily just only a spring calving herd. And so if you don't understand the cattle life cycle, like you have, a calf ready every 14 to 16 months, and they're generally ready all at the same time. And then what are you going to do the whole rest of the year to carry your inventory through? So we added a fall herd that we got cattle ready at different times of the year. And then also increased our freezer space too, where I can hold more than 3 head at a time. And, our lull period is like from December through like March time. I have to have a large amount of volume to carry me through there. Otherwise, we're pretty much processing every month besides then. And kind of also to what Lucas said, the regulatory side as well. Because I'm selling outside of the state of Iowa, that adds a whole new level of rules and regulatory things, different licensings, different stamps that need to be on the packaging that you wouldn't have to have if you were just staying within the state. So that was a big thing to overcome initially. And then also when I opened the farm store and I started bringing in other products besides our own, we had to switch licensing. We had to go from like just a warehouse freezer license to a retail food license. Certain things we've wanted to do, like Lucas was mentioning too, like we kind of have wanted to add like a warm serve type meal every week out of the store, but as soon as you start adding a cooked product into that, it adds a whole new level of more licensing and commercial kitchen and all of the things. And so we're trying to walk before we run.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. We've used up all our time. And Lily and Lucas, we sure appreciate your time. You've given us a lot of great information. I know it's busy for both of you, so we appreciate you setting aside a few minutes here this morning. So, Katie, I'll take it back to you.
Thanks, Dan. I really enjoyed that conversation with all of our young farmers, Lucas and Lily here. Just a fun seasonal note. Lucas was coming to us from the loft of Santa's workshop at the farm, and I have 2 young kids who really love Christmas, and I'll tell them that story later, and they will love it.
A lot of good tips today.
Right. And what Lily was saying there at the end, I hadn't thought about, and what they talked about, the complexities of the regulatory environment, especially if you're doing direct to consumer beef, which our next speaker will really probably be able to talk a little bit about that trend, being a cow calf producer herself. So Dan, thank you so much for bringing us that conversation. And anyone who wants to learn more about Lily and Lucas's farm, as well as the other recipients of our America's Best Young Farmers and Ranchers Award, can check out the January edition of Progressive Farmer Magazine. Right. We'll have in-depth profiles on all of them there. So thank you so much, Dan.
Yep. Plus videos. Yep.
And videos. Great point.
Yep.
We'll have those all up on dtnpf.com.
Thank you.
All right. And now, without further ado, I'd like to bring in ShayLe Stewart. She's DTN's livestock analyst. I know she caught at least the tail end of that presentation when Lily was talking about some of the issues with the beef side and some of the challenges there. Hey, ShayLe, how are you doing today?
Good morning, Katie. It sounds like you guys really started this off with a great set of speakers. So what an opportunity and just a privilege to be able to come in behind them. It's a great way to start our summit series.
Always, always. Now, I know that right now, the cattle market, there are a lot of things moving. There's no shortage of news to drive things outside of all the fundamentals that you work for. I'll let you take it away, and then we can do question and answers at the end. I'll remind everybody, drop those questions in the Q&A section on Zoom, and we will ask those at the end. So please, if you don't fill the Q&As, I will fill the Q&As, because I've always got lots of questions for ShayLe. So ShayLe, go for it.
Fabulous. Thank you, Katie. I'm going to take the reins from here. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us this morning. I know that it is hard in the holiday season and the wake of things to kind of block out some time to make sure you're doing your due diligence for your business, but it is so important. It is so crucial. And so I just want to thank you. And I truly feel blessed and privileged to be able to sit with you here the beginning of December. Just kind of take this opportunity to circle the wagons, talk about our businesses, talk about what transpired in a manner in which we're grateful for, talk about what monetary elements we're disappointed in, talk about the marketplace, its record high prices, the sheer cash flow that we saw come in, and then also talk about some of the things that we're just thoroughly disappointed in. And so it is so important that we have this time together. And I really like how here at DTN, we've taken the time to kind of sit with you twice a year, once in June, once in December. And I think those are just good times for us to sit together and say, hey, what's going on in your neck of the world? How are you taking this on in the marketplace? What are you doing different with your business? Has this changed anything in regards to your market strategy, plan, or tactics? And so that's what we're here to do again today. We're here to circle the wagons. We're here to talk about what transpired throughout the marketplace in 2025. And we're here to talk about what we might see moving forward in 2026. So with that, I just want to tell you that when I was preparing this slide deck, I kind of had a different thought process of how I was going to handle these slides in this presentation for our customers, for those of you tuning in today. And really, I thought this is from a producer, myself, for producers. And in today's world, there is so much chaos, there's so much noise, there's so much chatter, there's so much information that at some point we have to say, enough is enough. What really matters? And that is what this presentation is here today. It is to talk about if there are two things that I can hone in and really hopefully help you decipher and sharpen your pencil on, it's profitability and longevity. If there is anything that I can wish upon you, pray upon you, hopefully bless upon you in the year ahead, it's those two things, profitability and longevity. So when I prepared these slides, I had those two thoughts in mind, and this is the information that my husband and I sit down and talk about at night that potentially affects our business moving forward. And so it's the information that I thought was worthy and deserving of your time. So without further ado, let's focus on those two things, profitability and longevity moving into the 2026 calendar year. Without further ado, let's take a deep dive into the cattle market and beef industry. And of course, my friend John would laugh. He would say, ShayLe, you say you're going to talk about the cattle market and beef industry, but you've got to start with the weather. And he's so right. Here we are again. We have to. We absolutely have to. We have to talk about the factory of our industry, which is the beef cow herd, which is really dependent on two things, green grass and profitability. If you don't have those two things in mind when you talk about the U.S. beef cow herd, you're off your rocker. You're not honed in. And so we have to start here. Even though it's weather and this is a cattle presentation, here we go. So let's go ahead and talk. Let's spend some time saying, what kind of transpired throughout the year in regards to weather. And like I said, John is going to do a fantastic job tomorrow, really honing in on these details. I'm going to give you a little crumble, a little nibbit, and something just to kind of talk about where we sit, but listen to John tomorrow for the full scoop. So as drought implies, really drought, when I looked at last year's chart for this time compared to this year, drought has improved from last winter. Soil moisture is still low, and with La Nina, especially through the winter months, that usually means that drought's going to be a lingering factor. Now, in the northern plains and in the Midwest, we can expect colder temperatures most likely this winter. And so really we have lower soil moisture, and we're going to have harder weather temperatures. So that's not a great start to 2026. But John said that maybe by spring we can start to expect a change in that weather pattern and potentially have an El Nino, which means that we could see some, not all, some chances of increased moisture in some regions. But really what that means is we're going to see a chaotic weather pattern. So in parts of the U.S., we might be getting some rain, and other parts we're going to be dealing with drought. And so really that doesn't give us a great springboard for the cow herd as a whole. And so, like I said, this will impact the U.S. beef cow herd moving forward. And I'm here to tell you that drought needs to be on your radar moving forward, because like I said, it will influence whether or not producers keep back females or decide to send some more heifer calves to town and capitalize on this marketplace. Continue to watch our weather moving forward into 2026. And like I said, we start out with the beef cow herd because really it's the driving factors, the driving force for our industry. And so, my goodness, the top of the question is, ShayLe, what do you expect for the U.S. beef cow herd, the cattle inventory report that comes out at the later end of January for 2026? And I'm going to share with you a mixed bag of cards for this. And I'm going to explain my rationale why. So sit here with me for a little bit. Let's go ahead and talk about where we sat at this time last year. Before the January inventory report came out last January at 27.8 million head, we need to recognize and remember that that was an all-time low. Since the report had been tracked, 75-year low in the U.S. beef cow herd, and that's where we sat last January. Since then, we've seen some things change a little bit. We've seen higher prices, which has equated to greater profitability in the sector. Now, that's not to say it's been necessarily easy. We're still dealing with volatile markets. We're still dealing with record high inputs. It's not been an easy market to navigate, but because of the supply and demand mechanisms in the marketplace, we have seen some profitability in this sector. Now, as we move forward, obviously that January report is going to be so critical, so crucial to track, because whether or not the USDA comes out in June and says whether or not they want to retract some of those numbers, they made a mistake, what have you. However that report comes out is how the industry will absorb the information moving forward. So if they do come out and say that we've had some increase in the beef cow herd, that is going to almost be a trigger for some market participants. And you say, ShayLe, why are you talking about triggers in the marketplace? Because we have to remember that there's an emotional component to this sector, to this marketplace, and it is growing ever more to be an ever larger component of this marketplace because of the sheer volatility. And so the reason why tracking the cattle inventory report is so important is because remember last time in the cycle in 2014 and 2015 when the industry made the change, and you can look at the data here, go back to 2014, 2015 in the middle of the chart, and look, when the industry made the change to start to rebuild the cow herd, it happened almost overnight, and that change was so fast. Now, I'm here to tell you that the build back this year, or not this year per se, but this time in the cycle, it will not be the same. We do not have the same playing field. We do not have the same market participants. We do not have the same monetary regards in regards to interest rates. Land is harder to come by in regards to leases or availability. And so there's so much different in this cycle term than there was last time. And so just because the industry might potentially say we've seen a slight increase in retention, whether that be on the young female side of things, or we're just not simply liquidating the older cows as aggressively, that's not to say that prices are going to shift overnight and we're going to see just feeder cattle losing hand over fist. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But I am here to pressure you a little bit and say, like I said at the beginning when we started talking about the beef cow inventory, I'm not so sure that we have hard evidence that we really have seen some retention, some build back of a sizable measure. And the reason why I say that is because I believe it's so regional. Going back to the drought chart at the beginning of this presentation, as you saw, drought is a factor across a large portion of the United States. And so while I do know that there are some producers that have elected to keep some heifers back or maybe not send some cows to town because they simply can't afford to replace them, I'm here to tell you that is not a widespread decision. It is happening on a producer by producer basis or region by region basis, and it's not a collective whole in the industry. And then I'm also going to pressure you and say the cattle on feed report, the cattle on feed data tells us that the build back has not started yet. Per the November cattle on feed data, as of October 1st, the total number of cattle on feed equated to 11.441 million head of cattle on feed. Heifers possessed roughly 4.35 million head of that, which means that they equated to 38% of the total number of cattle on feed. The golden rule in the industry is that whenever heifers possess 37% or more of the total on feed numbers, that means that we are not seeing retention. We're not seeing those females kept back in the market, kept back in the herds to build the cow herd. That means that they're being sold to the feedlots to be producing fed cattle. And so, like I said, I'm not convinced that we're really seeing a sizable growth measure yet in the cow herd. Okay, ShayLe, so you talked about the young end side of things with the cattle on feed data. That would be most likely young females making their way into the feeding sector. Well, what about the old cows? What about the cull cow slaughter? And I'm here to tell you this data is interesting as well. And I think that it's so important that whenever we look at data, we look at the whole marketplace, the whole sphere. We don't just hone into one number and make a decision based on what it's telling us. Because adversely, if you look at the beef cow slaughter, let's work through these numbers and I'm going to help you understand what they mean at the end of this slide. Year to date, 2025 beef cow slaughter has been right at 2.34 million head. All right. What does that mean, ShayLe? It means that throughout 2025, we've averaged roughly 45,000 head of beef cows on a weekly basis. Now that's down from 2024. That's significantly down from 2022 when we really saw the liquidation well underway. But go to the bottom part of the slide on the right-hand side. Compared to 2014, compared to 2015, that 2025 number, that weekly average, really sits in the middle of what we were seeing when the cow herd started to be rebuilt during that time, doesn't it? Okay, so what would this data, what would this slide entail? Maybe we are keeping some cows back. But I would caution you and I would say we can't take one data set and make a consensus conclusion about the greater industry just on one data point. No wonder why we're processing less cows. We sit with a 75-year low in the US beef cow herd. What have we been importing in regards of beef into the United States? Lean trimmings, because we don't have the cows being processed, because we don't have them. Because look at that 2022 number. We processed them at an aggressive rate because producers simply were in too much drought and they didn't have the income to keep those cows. And so, like I said earlier, I'm not convinced that we've really started to retain at a degree in which I can say the cow herd is being built back yet. But I wanted to share that in the January report, you might see that cow herd grow a little bit. And so I wanted to share with you that that is a potential, but that I'm going to remain cautious in my approach. But I wanted to share that with you so that you were prepared for what the report might entail come January. All right, ShayLe, so what do you expect for the 2026 year ahead and the beef cow inventory? Like I said, the liquidation stabilized in 2025, but the market hasn't shown any surefire evidence across the board that we're growing the herd. You need to watch for that January cattle inventory report because if nothing else, it's going to play a psychological role in the marketplace moving forward. If we do see some growth, that might make some people nervous, and we need to track the record in which we're seeing that growth. Like I said before, it varies heavily upon region. And the other thing that I don't think that we're talking enough about in our industry is just how market confidence remains a factor moving forward. And really over the last 45 days, I think one of the biggest holes that we've seen aside from just the chaotic news, the news headlines in the marketplace is just how that has eroded market confidence. And whenever you have market confidence eroded from the marketplace, what is that going to do to producers? It's not going to encourage them to build back more aggressively. If anything, that's going to put a more cautious tone in their persona moving forward. So like I said, drought continues to be a factor. And again, the build back in this cycle, in this term, is not going to be like those in the last cycle where it was aggressive and fast and almost felt like as if it was overnight. And again, cow-calf producers will be in control of the market leverage into 2026 and most likely into 2027. With that, let's shift gears a little bit and transition into the fed cattle market. Oh my goodness, I know that some people might just look at this slide and say, ShayLe, it's just some lines, it's pretty boring. There's nothing really that catches my eye. Well then, friends, you need to look closer. So these are your negotiated and live cattle prices from 2002 all the way through 2025. Look at what our market has done through the last couple decades. Look at what our market has done through 2025. If you look to the right portion of this chart, that's what we've seen this past year. And my friends, I'm here to tell you it has been such a breath of fresh air to again see some price discovery in the marketplace. Like I said, on the right-hand side of this chart, you will see that the all-time highs were scored in the Fed cash cattle market in late August, early September 2024, where really those live southern prices were marked at 242, dress cattle were marked at 386, and last week, even though we've seen some reduction in the Fed cash cattle market, last week prices were marked at 220, dress prices marked at 230, and really we're expecting that prices are going to be quite a bit higher this week. So moving forward, the Fed cash cattle market has really seen an opportunity where feedlots have been able to capitalize on the marketplace, capitalize on limited supply, and drive those prices higher. Like, as I said, has been such a breath of fresh air, because there for a while, it felt as if there was no true price discovery in the marketplace. So what have we seen in regards to slaughter? What are we doing in the fed cattle sector in regards to slaughter, in regards to harvesting these cattle, getting the meat to consumers? Well, as you know, we've not ran as aggressive as a slaughter in 2025, simply because who runs slaughter speeds? Packers. How do packers protect some of their margin? Through throughput. And so if they're really being pressured to pay more for fed cattle, they're not going to crank slaughter speeds, because why? That's going to just dwindle their supply and make it to where they have to buy more cattle in the cash cattle market, which is going to drive prices higher. So in 2025, we've processed right at 25 million head of cattle. Obviously, that'll be more by the time the year's end. This was just as of last week. But through 2025, the weekly slaughter average has been right around 561,000 head on a per week basis. That's down compared to 2024, when obviously there was a few more cattle around. Right now, year to date, we're sitting at slaughter being down roughly 6%. Now, I'm going to caution you in the next couple slides. These are my passion slides, and so we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about it. Remember that I tell you that total slaughter is down 6%. But remember, packers buy cattle by the head and sell by the pound. So they not only manage inventory on a per head basis, but they also manage it on a per pound basis. So we'll talk about that more a little bit moving forward, but expect continued slaughter declines in 2026, especially in the first half of the year when supplies are expected to be the tightest. All right, here we go, guys. If we spend no time other than on these next couple slides, I will have done you a good service, because this is something that is changing in our industry before our eyes that'll have multi-decade ramifications, and you need to be aware of it. This is the USDA weekly slaughter data. It comes out 2 weeks behind, and so let's just go ahead and spend some time absorbing this information. Through 2025, steers have averaged throughout the entire year 951 pounds. In 2024, they averaged 927 pounds throughout the year. The 5-year average is at 913 pounds. Dr. Daryl Peel of Oklahoma State University did a phenomenal write-up, and he said, carcass weights have trended heavier over the last 60 years, with steer carcasses increasing an average of 4 pounds per year. The Kansas feedlot data shared that cattle are now spending an average of 190 days on feed, which was up 9 days from a year ago, and 40 days, an additional 40 days on feed compared to a decade ago. So what do you think that effect is going to have on the marketplace? I'm here to tell you. There's been a lot of conversation about, are these weights, are they a blessing or a curse? As of November 15th, dressed steers averaged 986 pounds, which was an all-time record high and is exactly 27 pounds heavier than what they were a year ago. And, I understand that we sit at a point in time in which we have a limited supply for our consumers. But we have to be very careful of keeping that equation in our mind. Like I told you earlier, packers buy by the head and sell by the pound. Read the red text here in the middle of the slide. A 25-pound increase in carcass weight per year is close to the addition of 1 million head of cattle per year through weight alone. So what does that tell you? Do you see the writing on the wall here? If we went back to the beef cow herd chart in our totals of what the beef cow herd has been in the United States for the last 2 decades, every time we see a decrease in the beef cow herd, it never regrows to the point in which it was before. So if you understand that with corn being cheap, an increase of tonnage on a per head basis, reduced turnover by feeding cattle longer, this allows corporate feedlots to buy fewer feeder cattle from you and I while still having plenty of fats to market to the packer. And this trend is slowly putting cow-calf producers out of business. And I want to caution you on another front. If you go through, each and every one of you, maybe you're a stalker, so maybe you're not buying the genetics, but if you go through and you pick up a wholesale catalog from 10 years ago and you compare the EPDs of that day compared to the one that you got just last year, look at how much has changed in the weaning weight division, and look at how much has changed in the yearling weight division. We are pushing these cattle to grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And while somebody might raise their hand and say, well, ShayLe, that's a blessing. My goodness, thank goodness we have that extra beef to market at a point in which the industry sits with a record low in the cow herd, because what would we do with beef prices if we didn't have that additional tonnage? All right, fair point. But what I'm here to tell you is I'm a producer for the producer. And so that data, that trend, what did I underline in this chart? That trend is slowly going to put cow-calf producers out of business, because through the increased tonnage, that means they need less of you and they need less of me. That is a scary trend. Take that point one step further. You have these steers that you're marketing. Some of you might be keeping females back. You're starting to think potentially about retaining some females into our cow herd. All right, you're pushing these carcass weights bigger and bigger and bigger. What's that going to do to the female that you're retaining? It's going to make her bigger too. What does a bigger female require? More inputs. What are inputs? There are costs. Be careful with the genetics you're procuring. Be careful with the trends that you fall into in your purchases, and know that there are ramifications that are greater than today in these trends. We have to be so careful. And this is something that I think our industry needs to be very aware of, because it could be something that is a real detriment in 5 years from now. Say we do start to see some slow build back in the U.S. beef cow herd, and we not only increase numbers, but these cattle are also bigger. What do you think is going to happen to prices at that point? Supply and demand, right? It's going to drive prices sharply lower. All right, I'll get off that soapbox, even though I think it's pretty fun. Let's talk about beef packer margins. All right, thus far through 2025, packers have averaged roughly $117 per head. Okay, you compare that to 2024, $184 per head. Ooh, compared to 3-year average, $279 per head. Holy smoke, ShayLe, they're probably feeling the pinch this year. You're right, they are. And you know what? We got the announcement, what was it, 2 weeks ago, that Tyson was going to close their plant in Lexington, going to reduce their plant in Amarillo down to just one single shift per day. I'm here to tell you they're feeling the pinch. Now, that's not me being a friend of the Packers and sympathizing with them. It's just that it's their turn in the market to be squeezed financially, and they are being squeezed. But because of that, you and I as producers need to know how that's going to change and have ramifications on our side of the market. You can expect that they're going to run tighter, thinner, fewer kill schedules moving forward, because they don't want to bleed any more red ink. So continue and expect to see reduced throughput through at least the first half of 2026. And if in the first half of 2026, the border is reopened to Mexico, we could start to see throughput increase a little bit, but that's going to be something that we need to watch moving forward. Oh, and one of the absolute saving graces that we need to thank our consumer for time and time again. Part of the incremental reasons why we've had such a good rally is because of the unwavering support of beef consumers. Look at the averages down here at the bottom chart here. Do you realize that these beef prices have rallied to a point in which, really kind of get up there in the threshold to rivaling what we saw in 2020 during the pandemic? Maybe not at the peak, but we darn sure have been there throughout the whole. Choice averaging 359.78, Select averaging 343. And if you go ahead and compare those numbers, I think it's really interesting that thus far through 2025, Select cuts have averaged more than what Choice cuts did in 2024. And really, that's just our consumers saying, hey, we recognize the product that you make, and we're willing to pay the higher price because it's consistent, it's high quality, and we want it on our tables. Even if it is costing us more money, we want it on our table. All right, that brings us to the import-export conversation of the cattle market. Now, obviously, these are estimates because of the government shutdown. We've had some challenges in getting the most current up-to-date information, but expected, the U.S. beef exports through the year end are expected to be down roughly 10%. Now, I think it's so interesting. Mainly, that's coming because we've had limited marketing access to China. If you take China outside of the export equation, our exports are only down 3%. That's a big difference. I think it's really important that we take into consideration that while China has been a headache, it's been a hassle to deal with, besides China, our exports have been pretty strong. We've been able to export aggressively into South Korea, Central and South America. And so thankfully, abroad, U.S. beef is still being sought after in an aggressive manner. Beef imports, U.S. beef imports are up roughly 20%. And like I said at the beginning of this presentation, what has mainly came into the United States has been lean trimming, something to mix with our fatty hamburger. And largely that's came from Canada, Australia, and Mexico. And again, not to create confusion, this is not live cattle, this is beef. And again, expect a similar trade situation in 2026 simply because I don't believe we're going to see a build back so aggressive that weighs our market down with enough supply. We're going to need to have more imports in 2026, probably much like we did in 2025. All right. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation, it has been a whirlwind of a year. We saw record high prices in the fed cattle sector. We saw record high prices in the feeder cattle complex. But I will tell you, it has been a tiring year tracking down news headlines. My goodness, never before have I experienced that. But it's almost like, we have so much access at the tip of our fingers, whether it's from news outlets to DC officials, to podcasts, which we have to get some of our information from. But nevertheless, the most recent New World Screwworm update came from the Lonesome Lands podcast, where they interviewed U.S. Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins, and she had some positive things to share, which I think are worthy of your time and understanding today, which is why I'm sharing them with you. On November 25th, Rollins was interviewed by the Lonesome Lands podcast, and she said the following. Number one, it's so important to understand. She stated that not all ports are going to reopen at once. That the port in Arizona is most likely to be the first to reopen, as it's the furthest from any detected New World screwworm. And number three, that it'll be a slow and methodical process, and that 1 million head of cattle are not going to show up overnight. This is big. This is positive. Our industry needed to hear this. Now, I will be the devil's advocate here. I'm thankful she took the time to share these details. Our industry needed to hear them, needed to know them. I wish there would have been a little more clarity from the get-go on this. But the detail will be in the devil's, and we'll see how this develops when it actually happens. A couple things I want to prepare you for. When the border reopens, there will most likely be two psychological reactions in the marketplace. When they announce that the border is going to reopen, that's going to be a bad day for the marketplace. Just from a psychological standpoint, the contracts are going to trade lower. Number two, the week that it actually happens, we're most likely going to see softness in both the feeder cattle complex and the live cattle complex, again, as a psychological realm. Now, some questions that I have for Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins that I wish that somebody would answer. Obviously, when is this going to happen? We've heard chatter that it's going to stay closed through the end of the year, but of course that could always change. And then the other thing that's just utterly baffling to me is what are the weights going to be on these cattle that are coming across? We've heard that there could be some fed cattle coming across, but given that it's Mexico, that seems a little hard to believe. And so I almost think that maybe we all need to join up and buy a drone and just fly over the border and see what these cattle are weighing. But hey, that probably wouldn't go over too well. So I'll talk to my boss about that. All right, what's our fed cattle outlook for 2026? There's some bullish factors in this marketplace. It's still a good marketplace. The market supplies through March and April will be thin. We actually expect that our thinnest supplies are ahead of us. So what does that mean? What does that mean? We could see a new high scored in the later part of the first quarter of 2026, the first part of the second quarter of 2026. Keep all eyes on ears on the marketplace because this rally isn't over yet. Now, with that, I do unfortunately have to say that there needs to be some caution tape wrapped around the market. Cattle are spending more time on feed. So that means that there's going to obviously be less turnover in inventory, volatility, volatility. There's too much of it in this marketplace, but unfortunately, friends, it's not going away anytime soon. It's something that you and I have to learn to dance with in this marketplace. And if there were to ever be an economic break in the consumer and demand were to go away, Annie, bar the door, because it would hurt our market substantially. Shifting gears, we're going to spend some time talking about the feeder cattle complex last, but certainly not least. My friends, it has been one heck of a year. I saw cattle prices trade at thresholds in which I didn't even know that I would experience in my lifetime. I think many of you had the same thought, the same rationale. It was a rally in which we honestly never saw coming. But one thing that we do as producers that I want to caution you with is sometimes, just trying to be the market analysts and market participants that we are, we see something good and we say, is the high end? Is the high end? Is it done? Did we reach it? And I just want to remind you that God created the world in 7 days and he did it through his words. He didn't do it through a toolbox. He didn't do it with a power tool. He did it through his words. And so if you're worried about the market, maybe we shouldn't put a cap on it ourselves as producers. We know that our tightest supplies are going to actually come when the U.S. beef cow herd starts to be rebuilt. Okay, sure, we're expecting to see Mexican imports open again, and then we're obviously going to see Mexican cattle entering the marketplace. But what's going to happen when they stop sending those females to the feedlots for fed cattle supplies and they start retaining them? That's going to make fewer fed cattle. And so that's going to drive prices higher. That's going to make bidding more aggressive. So don't put reins on this market when it stands a chance to grow higher. One thing that I think that's really interesting to talk about this chart right here, it does a really good job of just explaining the trend. The red line is the CME feeder cattle index. That's what cattle are trading out in the countryside. The black line is the continuous chart of the futures complex. And as you can see, it's been a rally. Compare that to the circle of 2014, 2015 high. And my goodness, we surpassed that by a mile long. Now, one thing that I'm continuing to watch is if you look at the timeline of 2023, 2024, the market was really comfortable trading at 240 to 260 throughout that 2-year span. And it'll be interesting to watch to see when the market does break and start to look for a support plane trading lower, where that support plane is going to be established. And my eyes are telling me that it could potentially, don't have a crystal ball, could potentially be somewhere between 240 and 260. All right, if I haven't beat you with a dead horse of volatility long enough, I'm going to do it some more before my time is cut short today, because I, again, want you to be profitable and I want you to sustain the duration of time. And so I cannot emphasize enough that while we've seen record prices this year, we've also seen record risk and record volatility. And so, my friends, please continue to understand that volatility and risk is something you have to manage in this marketplace. Let's look at some of the big headways, the big hurdles in which the market has endured the last 2 years. At the left side of this chart, in March of 2024, the market fell $11.85 in a month's time because of the HPAI outbreak. Then you move to the 1st of August, the second box. The market fell $22.98 and didn't fully recover that lost position for 4 whole months because of the equity market meltdown. Then you fast forward to 2025 and the industry almost laughs and says, watch this. You want to see volatility? Here it is. Trump says beef prices are too high, wants to import more from Argentina. Rollins meets with Mexico. Boom. The market lost $49.13 in a matter of 30 days. If I were to show this to my grandpa, this specific chart, he would have a hard time believing it because the dynamics in which his day and his heyday are not the dynamics of today. The market changes fast, it changes quick, it changes hard. And so with that, friends, I am telling you that while these prices do allow for greater profitability in your sector, you need to realize, you need to rationalize, you need to come to terms with volatility is tied to that as well. And so, if anything, external pressures are affecting the cattle complex more and more than compared to years past. We have money managed funds. We have electronic trading, you name it. The pressures on the cattle complex are great. And I so badly wish that the market were more closely tied to its fundamentals so that it would track a little more consistent, but it doesn't. And so with that, volatility will remain an embedded theme moving forward in the cattle sector. And even with these high prices, we cannot be laissez-faire about our marketing because at any point in time, chaos could erupt. Now, with that, you can breathe. You can breathe a little bit. We've got to remember to have fun. We've got to remember to enjoy because it has been a ride like never before. Through so much of the marketplace, we felt like the gentleman on the left throwing money. It was a good ride. We're still in a good ride. What am I talking about? But there have been days in this marketplace that I felt more like the gentleman on the right, shut my computer lid at the end of the day and said, what the heck? If you believe that, what the heck was that? And so I need you to remember that if you were in this marketplace, you're most likely playing a long-term game. But know that day-to-day trading will continue to be chaotic. And so if you're so tightly wound and woven in this marketplace that you're watching the day-to-day trade, you will go crazy if you let every dip, every turn affect you and rock you to your core. Know your long-term game. Know your marketing plan, your marketing strategy, your marketing tactic, and be honed in to what your objective is from your business. Because if not, this is way too risky of a environment and it'll drive you utterly crazy. But even with that, my goodness, we spent a lot of time talking about the volatility. It almost got a little depressing in here, but not today, friends, not today. We're still in a rallying marketplace, so we're going to enjoy these good prices. Holy smokes, after the last 45 days, like I said, we saw the cattle complex drop $49 in 30 days. And that slide, 2 slides ago is what I shared with you. So where do we sit? Are we still in a good position? Look at this. This is a sale barn report from Oklahoma, the National Stock Yards in Oklahoma City, November 26, 2024, compared to their November 24th, 2025 sale. Steers are basically the same weight, 2 different years. Still today, even with the volatility and the market disruption that we saw over the last 45 days with Trump and Argentina, are we going to reopen the border, all that chaos, steers are still selling 63 cents per pound more year over year than what they were a year ago. Look at this chart. The red bar going down is 2025. Everything to the left side of it, 2024, obviously the closest year and everything passed. Even with the dip, even with the downturn in the marketplace, we've never seen market conditions at these price levels ever before. So even though there has been some hardship endured, even if you sold your cattle during that down spell, you're still selling them for more than what you ever have before. All right, so what's our feeder cattle outlook for 2026? The first half of the year, I'm pretty bullish. I'm excited for this marketplace. We have limited domestic supply, and we have phenomenal consumer demand. And I also think that it is worthwhile to let you know that in 2023 and 2024, the market high of the feeder cattle complex was made in the first half of those 2 years. Now, obviously, we have bearish factors to still consider. It's most likely that the border will reopen sometime in the first half of next year unless something new develops. But it's most likely it could happen in the first half of next year. The second half of the year, we still are going to be bullish. Consumer demand is likely going to be strong. And even though we're going to see an uptick in supply compared to where we sit today, compared to years past, we're still going to be in a minimal position. But we will have added supply, which will weigh on the market slightly. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this presentation, open it up to questions, and thank you for your time. It's been a good ride. We're here to support you. Let me know how I can answer questions.
All right. Thank you, ShayLe. Just a reminder for anyone who does have questions, please drop those in the Q&A below, and I will make sure to ask those to ShayLe. But like I warned in the beginning, if you don't ask questions, I get all the time, and I'm really happy asking questions. So if there's something you want to know, drop it in there. All right, ShayLe, I'm going to start off with something you talked about a little bit at the beginning. You talked a little bit about how this herd rebuilding is maybe regional and among certain types of producers. Can you expand a little bit on what regions might be seeing some growth and what types of producers might be holding some cattle back?
So the region aspect, Katie, is a good one, and so is the producer question. And that's as simple as looking at the drought monitor. Obviously, I said there are two main factors that really affect the U.S. beef cow herd: green grass and profitability. So wherever there is drought, obviously those producers probably aren't looking at going into a winter where temperatures are expected to be colder and there could be some tough moisture accumulation, maybe. I'm prefacing that with a maybe. And so that's going to require more feed. Now, when we could look at a producer standpoint, we all know that the producer is aging here in the United States. And if you are an elderly producer or maybe just a producer with a little bit more age on you, are you really going to saddle into this marketplace and take on the added risk, take on the added volatility when prices are at an all-time high? Or are you going to phase out slowly or maybe phase out all at once? But then that's a double-edged sword, Katie, because from a young producer standpoint, how do you get into these cattle? They're too expensive from a banker standpoint a lot of times. And then you add in again, you add in the risk, you add in the inputs, you add in the interest, and hopefully they have some ground secured, because finding a lease for those cattle to graze, or maybe they have some purchased land, but that's generally not the case. And so there's a lot of uphill challenges in regards to building the cow herd. And so when Rollins did share that they could potentially be opening up some federal land, potentially opening up some CRP ground, that was really exciting for me. Now I know that there's not all producers are next to those land masses, but a lot of people are. So just one side of the token there.
Well, I was visiting with a friend of mine in Kansas earlier this week, and she mentioned that they had a family, were able to rent some pasture, but it was 2 hours north of them. And so they've got sort of a seasonal work, and it's like even that far away, they're willing to make it work. I mean, there are a lot of challenges on location when it comes to the herd rebuilding too.
Without a doubt.
Okay. Let's see. No questions from anyone. All right. More for me. You mentioned a little bit there on China's exports. When I first started working at DTN right out of college, one of the things I covered was a little bit about the evolution in trying to get into the Chinese markets. Can you give us a little bit of backstory there about how hard the beef industry has worked to build a Chinese export program, and maybe any concerns about this in the long term?
Absolutely. Susan just flagged us.
Oh, are we almost at time? Well, answer my question anyways.
Okay, perfect. We have a superior product here, and we should be so grateful and so thankful and so appreciative that we have worked in some of those individuals with the U.S. Meat Export Federation, but really the producer too has worked to build a product that is sought after by nations far and wide. And that has been an uphill battle, because not only do they want it, but it is expensive for most of them. And it's been a learning curve even to teach them how to cook the meat. It's not something that they're necessarily expecting in a lot of their dishes. But thankfully, that's something that the U.S. Meat Export Federation has spent a lot of time doing and developing those relationships, those plates really. And even we're seeing some of that develop right now in Africa. And so thankfully, because of the work that they've done, even when we might be in a bit of a trade war with China, we've been in an okay position from an export perspective, simply because we've developed those trade relationships in other nations. So I think it's really important that we take care of those who buy from us, but we never stop developing new relationships, because you never know when something's going to go haywire or relationship's going to go astray and you need to export to a new market. So thankfully, you do have to give the folks with U.S. Meat Export Federation some credit there. They've done a good job.
Yep. And we are seeing firsthand, especially on the soybean side of the ledger, what it's like when you have a very large portion of your product going into one market, and what happens when there's a disruption there. All right. We have a question from the audience. I think this is maybe referring to some of the newer marketing tools out there, LRP and whatnot.
I guess I can't read that question, Katie. Do you mind?
Sure. I'll just repeat it here. Have you heard of more producers using risk management during these times?
That's been a tough one. And I think that it's something that at first we did hear more producers using LRPs and kind of taking some of the risk with that. But an LRP is not inexpensive. And it's not to say that it's going to safeguard you from all risk. And so really, I think it's been producer by producer driven. And so, no, I can't say as a whole we've seen more of it. I think it's become more of a known tool in our industry. But like I said, with the sheer price point in which we're seeing those trade at, it's not something that I think as a whole. Now, what I will say that I have seen more of is actually on the pasture, range, and forest side. And land side. And so I feel like a lot of people are kind of looking at that drought insurance and taking more utilization in that. What I've seen personally through the producers and the friends and the customers that I talk to is I've seen it more there. Whereas the LRPs, if they want flexibility in their marketing, they've got to let them know what weight they're going to market at, what month they're going to market at. And so there are some strings tied there. I'm not saying that it's not a good option, but what I'm saying is that I won't throw a blanketed comment saying that everybody should have one, because that's just not how we can operate. But like I said, I've seen more pasture range and forest insurance than LRPs, truthfully.
And I think it's interesting that you mentioned the amount of volatility that's going on in the market today. They also have the pasture range and forage insurance is fairly new, and it's a big part and a big addition to this industry because for a long time, there was nothing like this in the cattle industry. Yeah, just absolutely nothing. Okay. You mentioned that carcass weights keep going up and up and up. Has there ever been a time they would decline, or what would maybe be a force that could change that trend? Or is it just not going to happen?
Well, no, throughout the year we see ebbs and flows. There's obviously seasonalities. Throughout the summer, cattle back off a little bit because they don't feed as good. Through the winter, they pack on more weight. But if there's a big snowstorm, we can see them regress a little bit. But really what we need to look at is the genetics. And the other factor that has been playing into this more than probably it would at a different point in time is cheap feed. And so when the feedlot managers are sitting on a surplus of corn, what are they going to do with it? They're going to feed it. That's a way for them to market it. It's no shame. It's just how the game is played. And so, but the bigger point here being is Dr. Daryl Peel did the study over 60 years, and he saw that there was a 4-pound increase year over year. And as a producer, as somebody in our business, we run seed stock cattle. We have a female that we keep around for years, for decades in some circumstances. And so when we look at that female, yeah, you market a steer, you sell a bull, but the female is the one that you're going to feed for hopefully 10 to 15 years. And so if she's gaining weight, we have to look at the cost of that as well. And so, like I said, it's a two-pronged coin. It's been heavily pushed, and something that I think we need to spend some time reconsidering.
I was visiting with the editor of Horde's Dairyman at an event earlier this year, and she made a comment about looking back at 60 years of their comparison of their dairy cow heifers, the cover, and just how different the cattle look because of the way they've been bred and the genetics, and they're so much taller than they used to be.
Well, and that's a good point, Katie, because now 1 in every 5 head of cattle fed through the fed slaughter is beef on dairy influenced. And so we do have to give respect that with the larger influence of the dairy cattle in the feeding sector, that is obviously going to push weight up a little bit because they are a larger framed animal. But at the end of the day, we're seeing it on the beef sector too. And I mean, like I said, go grab your catalog from 10 years ago from somebody you buy bulls from, compare it to last year, and you'll see a huge spread in the weaning weight, yearling weight, carcass weight, EPDs.
Okay. A follow-up question on the carcass weight, and knowing who asked it, it's probably a little bit sarcastic. Is carcass weight going up? Is it keeping up with the consumer weight increase as well? I think just a little bit of a giggle there, but we did talk a bit about consumers, and that was another question I had there because I am one of them. I am a millennial mom buying groceries for my house as well. So I speak a lot to that, and I talk to my friends about beef. What do you see being as something that would change beef demand? Because I'm hearing that some of my friends are becoming more price sensitive. If hamburger is $6 a pound at the grocery store, they might compare it to ground chicken or ground turkey.
Well, take them by the hand and lead them to the light, Katie. Don't let them fall in those traps. Really, I think that the utility of hamburger is one thing that we understate. You might do some chicken to cheapen things up. You might grab some pork every now and then. But what a pound of hamburger can do in regards to the nutrient quality is understated in America. And I think that it's just really something that has been widespread. And while, yes, to Ken's question, we do have individuals that choose other products that maybe aren't quite as healthy. Beef is something that's trusted and that is nutrient dense and that can feed a family, and hamburger can go a long way. So I understand that shopping is expensive. I hate that I can hardly go out of Walmart without a $200 to $300 cart. It is what it is. And I also know that at the same time, if you do a price comparison, all right, 6 pounds for hamburger might sound expensive. But when I go and pick up a package of chips and it's $6, $6 is $6. where are you going to put your nutrient equation? I'm going to put it on the nutrient dense beef.
I would too. That is exactly where I would put it. And it's like, my child is picky, but he eats tacos and hamburgers. So,
That's what we need.
I will feed him tacos and hamburgers as much as he wants. But I also buy my beef half beef at a time from a producer not unlike Lily Behringer, who was saying earlier, about her direct to consumer business. I think that's a growing trend. Kent sent a follow-up, so we'll address that, and then maybe you can touch a little bit on the direct to consumer. He said he's thinking more along the lines of 30 million head times 27 pounds, but there are 2 billion consumers. So our consumers per capita, maybe, consuming more of that beef, is 5 pounds more per head needed to feed a growing number of people, if I'm understanding the follow-up to his question.
I think that's a fair point to raise, because you're basically emphasizing the point that we need the beef, ShayLe. We sit with an all-time record cow herd. Beef prices are already high. Okay, you might be a beef advocate, but what about somebody who just is going to the grocery store to feed their family? They need to make ends meet. I understand that. And so thankfully we do sit with that today. But in 10 years from now, how are you going to feel when we have an even tighter beef or US beef cow herd and there's not the product, and so we're going to import it most likely from Brazil? How are you going to feel about it then? Because there are ramifications, there is causation here, right? It's not just about today. Thankfully, we have the beef that we have. We're able to import some. We raise a tremendous amount of good quality product, but it's about the continuation. And so if we continue to make these cattle bigger, bring in more beef on dairy, phase more just true grassroots cow-calf producers out of the industry, just know that won't show up in the consumer box at your grocery store in the years to come.
So you heard a little bit of what Lily Behringer was saying earlier about her direct to consumer business. I know in the post-COVID years, that was kind of a big shift that happened when some of those slaughterhouses and things shut down for COVID concerns. Do you see that growing, or is that kind of trend kind of hit a peak?
I don't think it has hit a peak, Katie, and I know that it's going to be regionally based. It's going to also be, it's something that Katie, like Lily, has done a phenomenal job just marketing the business. But even in our area up here, people want to know where their beef was raised. I had a little old gentleman at the grocery store here in Cody, Wyoming, stop me, and I mean, he was probably 85, and with the sincerest look in his eye, he said, "Can you tell me if this package says raised in the U.S.?" And none of them do. They might be packaged in the US, but we don't have mandatory cool. We have voluntary cool. And so I think that relationship of wanting to know that my cattle were raised here, born here, fed here, slaughtered here, packaged here is something that's going to become a bigger talking point moving forward, because we want that safety. We want that security. We want that authenticity in the market. And I think that the consumers, as evidenced, are willing to pay for it. They know how nutrient dense the product is. They know it's safe. They know it's reliable. They know who it's coming from. Whereas there aren't those standards on the bigger packing sector.
We're seeing a confluence of millennial trends, because millennials are now becoming large spenders in the economy. We are procuring for household. Millennials like two things. They like to know where their food is coming from. It is a generational thing, but they also are on the sort of the protein kick. They are, looking at the food pyramid and saying this emphasis on carbs is a little wrong. And there's a lot more of the protein driven demand out there from these trends in millennials. And from where I sit, I see those things merging in a lot along the women that I know and who's buying for their house and how they buy.
And how they're buying for their children. And then, I mean, whether you like them or hate them, if the MAHA agenda is pushed through and we start to see that food pyramid change and we start to see more beef, or not just beef, but protein integrated into the school system, that's a huge component. And so going back to Ken's question, we need more cows. We need the right kind of cows to supply the need of everyone. Whether you're buying hamburger or tomahawk steaks, we need the beef.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see. Wow, we've gone through my list, ShayLe. Are there any other thoughts you've had since we've been talking, or any sort of final or concluding things you'd want to bring up?
I think that we really hit the nail on the head. I do just want to welcome anybody to send any of us on the analyst team, myself, Rhett, questions. And it doesn't have to just be the 2 times that we meet throughout the year. You are welcome to email us throughout the year at any point in time, and just really to open the door, because these are challenging times. They're exciting, high prices, hopefully high profitability, but like I said, high risk, high volatility. And so whether it's just an emotional component of, hey, where do you think this thing's going? Today, it just kind of kicked me in the teeth. I had a hard time looking at the red ink, or it's something that you want to talk in regards to nuts and bolts. I had the hardest project of my life this past year, and I told the gentleman, with all things considered, that it was really the biggest challenge of my career. I had a gentleman who's trying to buy shares in his family's operation, and they are a big outfit, over 2,000 cows. And so that helps you put into perspective the monetary values in which we're talking here. And he needed to know the price projections for the next 8 years. And I told him, I said, I just need to be frank with you. I don't know what's going to happen next week. You saw the record volatility in the marketplace. I can give you what I believe, but I just share that because while you and I might think in a 6 month term of marketing, there are individuals in our marketplace that are working on an almost decade level spectrum. And so we need to sharpen our pencil, be the producer that you want to be, live the life that you want to live, give your family the experience that you desire, but also be the businessman that you're called to be. And so, like I said at the top of this webinar, I pray profitability over your operation. I pray for longevity, because we need more cow-calf producers in the sector. And so with that, doors wide open, send any emails you have.
I think that's a wonderful thing to bring up, ShayLe, because I don't think people realize that our editorial and analysis team is completely independent, and we are here to support we publish our emails everywhere. It's very easy to get a hold of us if you need us. You're always out speaking and talking and doing different things, and Rhett Montgomery is doing the same. He'll be joining us tomorrow to give us the outlook on the grain market and different things. So thank you so much for your perspective on the beef cow industry today, on feeder cattle, on fat cattle, on where all of that is going. I'm really excited. And I just want to point out to everyone that I am serving prime rib for Christmas. Like
okay, that's the best way to end this. Thank you for your time today. I'll hop off, and it's going to be delicious. I know it will be. Thanks, Katie.
My favorite. Thanks, ShayLe. Have a good one. And I hope all of you will join us back again tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning. We'll start off with a conversation on the weather outlook for 2026. We have a really phenomenal long-range weather team here at DTN. You may not know that we are a global weather provider, one of the largest private weather providers out there in the world. We provide a lot of hyper-local interest and hyper-local data that informs our insights. So we'll be looking into those long-range weather forecasts with our own ag meteorologist, John Baranek, and we'll follow that up with a grain market analysis of corn, soybeans, and wheat from Rhett Montgomery, and then a Q&A with the both of them, which is one of my favorite parts of the program because they tend to go back and forth and have some really good discussions there at the end. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all back here again tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Central Time. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.